here yearly, either in front of a screen because of the pandemic or actually here in person. I asked my colleague Sarina, who many of you have met here in Stockholm, and she said, well, I think it's almost a decade now. So regardless of these quite unusual circumstances we all find ourselves in, I'm really, really happy that we're still able to upkeep that tradition. And even though this is an online modality, we're all sort of longing to meet in person. It's really the second best. And we're really pleased to continuing this tradition with you, Venerable.
Good, I'm so happy. I'm happy. So, okay, and welcome to our Latvians as well. I've been going to Latvia.
Exactly.
I don't know how long I've been going to Latvia, but maybe the same as Stockholm, because you're just across the road, aren't you?
Pretty much.
Anyway, I'm happy to be here at Lama Zopa Rinpoche Center. Both of you, all of you. Okay, so Amanda, are you going to do a little mandala offering, or you plan to do something first, or?
I'm planning to do absolutely nothing. I'm planning to give the floor to you, openly and openly.
Okay.
Maybe if I can steal 2 minutes for just practicality. Is that okay?
Yeah, go. There's no hurry.
All right, fantastic. As you mentioned, Robina, and it's true, so we're very happy to co-host and co-plan this together with our sister organization in Riga. So there are quite a few new people I can see here on my little screen, and I assume some of them are actually from the Latvian community. And this is one of the perks. So the pandemic for me has taught me a lot of things, but in terms of organizations, it's taught me that distance doesn't really matter that much anymore. So this is a way for us to actually build community and sense of community regardless of where we physically at.
Yes.
So this year, Venerable Robina is giving 2 talks, one tonight and one Sunday. On Sunday, we will start at 4 p.m. Sunday afternoon, Stockholm time. I believe that's the same time zone as Riga. Tonight, we're a blended modality here in Stockholm, meaning we have some people at the center. On Sunday, for those who are associated with Yeshin Norbu, we will not be doing that blended modality, but only screens only. The same link that brought you to this room today will bring you to the talk on Sunday, right? So there's only one link that you need to remember and keep track of. There is Latvian translation, so for those of you who prefer to hear the talk in Latvian, please ensure that you're on the Latvian channel in the Zoom call, right? The same goes with questions. So if you want to ask a question in Latvian, please write your question in the chat box, and then we will get translation that translates that to English and post to Venerable.
And our translator's name is Edgar.
Edgar, our eminent Edgar. He's here for our benefit, really.
He's been my Latvian voice for many years.
See, he's a good one, right? Same goes, we try to save questions for later. That's up to you, Venerable.
Yes, sure.
If you want to ask questions in the chat box, that's fine.
Okay.
We'll just do that in the most sort of easy breezy way of doing this.
Sure thing. Okay.
Without any further ado, I'm finished with all the boring stuff. Thank you, everyone, for attending and enjoy.
Thank you, so kind, Amanda. Thank you, Ryan. Happy you're there. Okay, you people. So I'll sing a little prayer, but we'll make it very casual. But it's really important to think of the meaning of the words we're saying, because we're going to talk about this. Because for the Buddha, every thought counts. They're not just meaningless. Every thought kind of programs us. So just think, we're going to be here together for a couple of hours. We're going to listen, and that includes me, even though I'm talking. We're going to listen to, think about, maybe analyze these words. But the best way to hear it is as advice. You don't have to take the advice. Buddha is not the boss. He's not forcing us to believe what he's saying, but it is advice. And so what's the advice for? Well, kind of 2 things. There's this lovely analogy in Buddhism that a bird needs 2 wings. Wisdom and compassion. So, the point is the compassion wing, being of benefit to the world, But as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, compassion is not enough. We need wisdom. So what wisdom means, keeping it simple, is simply being more clear within ourselves, and less neurotic, less fearful, less attached, less depressed, less angry. therefore more steady and more content, and therefore more connected to others. It's very logical, actually, psychologically. So we're thinking of this, taking this advice to help us develop these two wings, thinking very simply. Sangye charang soke chognam la jang chu badu dagni kyab su chi dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drubha shog sangye charang soke chognam la jang chu badu dagni kyab su chi dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drubha shog Sangye charang choke chognam la jangchu baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drubha shok. You have to give me like 30 seconds, I'm so sorry. I've got to get a tissue, I forgot. Hang on. All right. Okay, so that title, I suddenly forget the title, but it doesn't matter. I think I understand. The two wings of the bird really fits here, When things go wrong in the world, even in your own house or the whole country, and indeed the whole world, this pandemic is kind of pervading the universe, isn't it? And it brings a lot of disruption, therefore causes lots of fears and anxiety in our minds, So we can see that no matter how much we want everything to be lovely in our lives, and we really try hard, we can't guarantee, So it's fine when everything is lovely, when your husband does what you want and he smiles at you and the food is delicious and the weather is nice, everything goes nicely. When everything goes nicely, we feel very good and we feel very comfortable. We can handle things. But we check up what happens the second something goes wrong. Your husband doesn't listen properly. The food is the wrong taste. The weather is bad. The traffic light is red instead of green. And I'm talking simple things. Forget about having COVID-19. Forget about getting cancer. Forget about serious dramas, Then we can see we get very upset very easily. I mean, this is such simple talk, But somehow, if we look at the Buddhist analysis, it's really quite helpful. Because we tend to say, well, it's natural you get upset. Of course I get upset if things go wrong. Of course it's natural, we'll say. So when we say something is natural, we sort of mean you can't do anything about it. You've got to accept, and that's very passive, So that this is where the Buddhist view comes in, actually. I mean, it's so interesting. The word Buddha, which is the etymology of it is really tasty. It actually tells us the end result of this work of being a Buddhist. You're on this track of developing these two wings, and the end result is indicated by this word Buddha. And it sounds almost too simple, but it indicates a lot. It tells us a lot, So the Tibetan equivalent is Sangye. So the first syllable, Bud or Sang, implies the complete eradication from our mind, our very being, of all ego, all fears, all neurosis, all anxiety, all worries, jealousy, depression, anxiety, anger, you name it. We are so familiar with these things. And indeed, we say they are natural. And we mean by that you can't do much about it. But this is the point the Buddha's making, and it's quite shocking, actually, if we take it very seriously. Don't just think of it as religion. When we hear a religion, we sort of don't take it seriously. We think, oh, well, you can believe what you like. That's ridiculous. The Buddha is not a creator. He doesn't assert a creator. And everything that is Buddhism is not just something from revelation, not something he made up. It's coming from his own direct experience. So this first syllable indicates the first thing that Buddha has said the job that he has done, that we are all capable of doing. And it's pretty shocking if you really think about it, that he is suggesting that all the fears and ego and the sense of separateness and loneliness and anger, anxiety, depression, that we are totally familiar with. He is saying that he has found from his own experience, this is the job he did, ridding his mind of all of this. I mean, psychologically, that's quite shocking. You go to some therapist and you ask her to please give you methods to get rid of all that stuff, she'll think you're mentally ill. But this is exactly what Buddha's saying. So all the Buddha's teachings are in reference to this possibility, this marvelous potential. But not only can we do that, the second syllable, da, or ge, implies the development to perfection of all the other stuff in our minds. Love, compassion, intelligence, joy, you name it. Again, words we are intimately familiar with. So this is the radical difference in the Buddhist approach, the radical difference in Buddhist psychology. And as you know, Buddha is a psychologist. It's not being sarcastic. Buddha's main emphasis, Buddha's expertise is the mind. And this is what we're going to be talking about, the way the mind works, and trying to show logically how this goal is a possibility. Don't hold your breath, it's going to take a while, but even if you can't imagine getting rid completely of all the nonsense, already what it indicates is we can work with it and lessen the power of these neuroses. And why should we? Guess what, people? Because they cause us suffering. It's so simple. It's not a moralistic issue. It's not saying you're a naughty person, you must stop being angry. Buddha's telling us, listen folks, if you look into your mind and you look into those states of mind and you check how you feel when you're involved in those states of mind and you check what it causes you to do in your life, you will see it is unbearable suffering, you know. This is the simple point that he's making. And so the other qualities, check the last time you were kind, loving, compassionate. How did you feel? It's absolutely evident. You felt good. This is almost too simple for us, you know. We don't speak like this in modern psychology. We've got much more kind of complicated, I'd say, complicated ways of presenting the way the human mind works. This is the Buddha's. And where did he get this from? Well, his own experience. But he came out of this amazing Indian tradition for hundreds of years before him. As the Dalai Lama said, His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. Well, we European-based people probably thought it was Mr. Freud 100 years ago. I mean, how arrogant we are, you know, excuse me. So this knowledge is only really now becoming more and more known in the modern world. Because of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, we know that. Unbelievable, these conferences he's been having with the best brains in modern science and psychology and so on for the last 30, 40 years. It's now becoming known in the world. It's marvelous, you know, but it's been completely hidden to us. What do we know? We didn't learn about India or China when we were at school. We tracked our knowledge back through the Europeans, back to the Greeks, didn't we? Nothing wrong with the Greeks. I mean, all our fancy words are in Greek. I'm sure it's the same in Latvian and Swedish. As soon as it gets fancy or it's scientific, we turn it into Greek. It's very funny. Or Latin, maybe mostly Greek. Anyway, the Buddha's deal is this. So that's telling us straight away that end result, Buddha, already indicates, doesn't it, the methodology. So if it is possible to even lessen your anger and depression and anxiety and despair, forget about getting rid of it, and develop the other parts of yourself, it's absolutely obvious that the essential job of being a Buddhist, as Lama Yeshe puts it, of being your own therapist, the essential job is learning the skills to identify and distinguish between these two states of these two categories of states of mind. This is the essential approach in Buddhism, you know. And it sounds very simple. It is simple. Technically, it is simple. But why is it so difficult for us? This is what we have to look at. There's a whole series of things, you know, conspiring to make it as difficult as possible to do this seemingly simple job. Well, the first one is really obvious. I'm with my boyfriend. Let's say, whoever it is, I want to use Edgar. He has to translate for me. That's no good. There's Yanis. I'll use Yanis. You're my boyfriend, Yanis, okay? So there's Yanis, and he's my boyfriend, and I think he's wonderful. But then one day, he's not kind to me. And I'm sad, or I'm angry and upset. And you say to me, Robina, why are you angry? Why are you suffering, Robina? And I'll say, Yanis did that. Now you would agree with me. You'll go, I understand, Robina, you have the right to be angry. How dare he do that? So this is normal, ordinary analysis. The whole world does this, you know. The monkey, the dog, the ant, if you try to take the dog's food, it'll snarl at you because you are the cause of his suffering. But the Buddha's simple point is, yes, indeed, Yanis did that. People agree he was mean to me. He's not arguing that it's not true. He was mean. But Buddha says, guess what, Robina? You can change your mind. If you can, there's a saying in Buddhism, if you can change the outside world, if I can get Yanis to stop being mean, then I've solved the problem. But it could happen again. So he says, but especially you can change the outside. If you can, please do it. But what if you can't? And even if you can, why not much more stable and solid and is to change your own mind. This is the part that even we hear these words, it seems too simple. We can't get it. So then, in other words, Amanda comes along and says, oh, I know what you mean. Yanis is mean boy, but you have chosen to live with him, Robina. So what do you think you can do about your own mind? What do you think you can do about your anger? What do you think you can do to change? And I'll be shocked. I'll say, why should I change? Yanis is the problem, I'll say. Now, that's the world's view. That is our view instinctively. But so where did this view come from? Well, Buddha says this is the view of ego. This is how we all are. Primordial mistake in our mind that puts all the power on the outside world. And it's exactly the same with happiness. Robina, why are you happy? Amanda will say. And I'll say, oh, Yanis is so kind to me. In other words, we are completely addicted to the belief deep in our bones that what goes on out there is the main cause of my happiness and the main cause of my suffering. So this is not a moralistic issue. Buddha's not saying you're not allowed to have handsome boyfriends and nice chocolate cakes. Please have as many as you like. But all he is saying is that we put an intense overemphasis on the power of the outside world, the power of the cake, the power of the boyfriend. We believe that is where happiness is. Not only do we feel that the cake is the cause of my happiness, we almost feel that is the happiness. Think about this. This is very interesting. When we have memories and you remember that meal last week and you feel happy. Tell me about your happiness, Robina. I won't tell you about my happiness because that's internal. I'll tell you about the cake. When I'm hurt and suffering, and I remember my suffering from last year, I will tell you about what Yanis did. So in other words, we are so addicted to the outside. This almost seems silly to point it out because it's so natural for us and it's so logical for us. And this, excuse me, with respect to all of our modern psychological methods, this is the basis of their analysis. That's why when you go to your therapist and you're depressed or you're angry or you're jealous, she helps you go back into the past and look. We're looking for some needle in a haystack, aren't we? Trying to find the main cause, the first cause, or the cause of why is Robina angry? Why does Robina choose bad boyfriends? We're looking into some past event, especially with our parents, or we're looking into our brain or our genes or our DNA. So everything we do is focused totally on the outside. In other words, we kind of know in our modern views that we can change our anger, but we think we have to change the outside first. But the Buddha's approach is, technically it's simple, like I said before, but it's so hard to do, and this is the first reason, we can't even hear it, because it's shocking. What do you mean I can change my mind? Why should I change my mind? We will say, I am allowed to be angry. So in other words, the way a whole kind of all the assumptions in our mind that are quite detailed and quite deep, they all are all the assumptions are all about my right to be this way, and I'm an innocent victim, and it's not my fault, and it's the outside world. You analyze our own feelings, we will see this is how we feel. This is real suffering. This is not being critical. This is why we suffer, Buddha says. We feel hopeless. We feel complete victim of circumstances. We feel there's nothing I can do. Which is why we go crazy, We can hear these words. We all recognize, I'm quite sure. This is the first reason why it's so hard to even hear that we should learn to look into our mind and start to unpack and unravel our mind and then begin to understand not the event, but the anger itself. This is quite complex. This is quite abstract for us even. Quite abstract. What do you mean, understand my anger, It's very confusing to us. So the next reason, well, that's about two reasons in there packed in that make it difficult for me to even want to look into my mind. The main one, it's the outside world. So in other words, that's the main reason why. So then, of course, if we start to think, okay, I like the Buddha's view, let me see if I can look into my mind, it's almost puzzling for us. We don't quite understand what it means, look into my mind, because we're so addicted to thinking it's the brain. So this is why it's important, even just to hear the Buddha's view of what the mind is. It's kind of interesting. It's quite different in many ways, fundamentally. So Buddha would say your mind is not physical. This sounds pretty abstract for us. But that, when we look at the bigger picture in Buddhism, the view about karma and how we come into this life and why we come in with certain tendencies and what causes those tendencies, all of this, the view very clearly in Buddhism is that mind is not physical. And it's not the brain. It's not a function of the brain. It doesn't mean it doesn't depend upon the brain. I mean, without insulting neuroscientists, I would say that the brain is a physical indicator of what is going on in our consciousness, our mind. Consciousness and mind are used synonymously in Buddhism, hang on, excuse me. Consciousness and mind are used virtually synonymously in different frameworks, but use the same meaning. So it's a fundamental point that they're not physical. The mind is not physical. And it's interesting. I was reading after I was editing Lama Zopa Rinpoche's book, which came out last year, called How to Face Death Without Fear. It's an amazing handbook, really. How to understand the Buddhist approach to what life is, what death is, what happens at death, how to navigate it, and how to, these types of things. So I remember reading, during the period I was editing this book, I read a book by an American medical journalist called Nick Teresi, and it's called The Undead. Well, it's not about zombies, okay? But he's a very funny fellow. He's a journalist, a medical journalist, and it's all his intense research into the industry of cutting, what do you call it? Organ donations. And I'm not being cynical, but he was quite cynical about the industry in many ways. It's a marvelous thing to do, but he said it was quite elitist, it was quite arrogant, people forcing people to give their organs, quite difficult. But the key point was that so many conflicts and contradictions now that are coming up about exactly when death does occur. So, for example, one of the things he talked about, over the centuries, there have been in every culture, there's always discussion about people who, quote unquote, come back to life. We hear about this all the time. Now, if you take the philosophical materialist view, the neuroscientific view of the world, clearly you can't explain that. It just doesn't work. So we don't know what to do. We can't explain it. But this is suddenly becoming a real issue. When a person, you've got them ready to cut out their liver, and they come back to life. I mean, it's most inconvenient. So one of the obstacles was this, so that really causes people forces people to look at their assumptions. The other one, he had a whole chapter on people who have what they call out-of-body experiences while they're on the operating table. In other words, under anesthetic. When obviously, from the materialist point of view, from the medical point of view, there cannot be any awareness. But all these people, completely anesthetized, reporting crystal clear exactly what was happening during the operation, everything that they said, the music they played. Of course, initially, mostly he said, people just ignore it, don't be ridiculous, it's not possible. But he quoted one woman who had to have such an intense procedure in operation, on some delicate operation. They had to almost shut down all her organs. So from their point of view, there was no way she could have any awareness. But he joked and said how she reported the most vivid out-of-body experience, so clear that nobody can argue with it. So this is really marvelous because in a way it's forcing people to question their assumptions. This is what's happening with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all his discussions with the scientists, really looking at what we think the mind is, and in particular what happens at the time of death. So one doctor quoted in this book said, I can now say with certainty that consciousness is not a function of the brain. I don't know what it is, but this much I can say. So I think it's marvelous looking at these things, I mean, in one way, applying the Buddhist techniques in a simple way in your daily life, who cares where your mind is? Who cares if your mind is in your toenail? It doesn't matter, because you can still apply this approach. But I think we always ask questions, and we're always interested in these types of things. And it's kind of interesting, So here, of course, we're taking the Buddhist view of consciousness not being a function of the brain, but at the same time the brain absolutely, of course, at the grosser level of the physical body, Of course it plays a role. But the other point, in the long term in Buddhist approach, this is where this discussion of is it the brain or not, this is where it really comes into play. As everybody, people in the world now know, vaguely this word mindfulness, right? This word mindfulness. Well, it's kind of it's got now 47 varieties. If people use it themselves and make up their own definition, and that's okay, but don't confuse it with the Buddha's view. And really the actual name of the technique in Buddhism is actually called, it's really a technique for developing what they call single-pointed concentration, samadhi. So this concentration, and this is where the radical difference is in Buddhism from the Western view, from the materialist view, is this level of concentration is at a level of mind way beyond the grosser level. When you've got this single-pointed concentration, and this technique, by the way, was invented by these Indians 3,000 years ago. That was what they used to investigate the nature of self, not with a microscope on the brain, but with the microscope of their own mind turned inward. They, this is positing a subtler level of cognition, a subtler level of mind that indeed does not have anything to do with the brain. This is where the radical difference is, So Buddhism asserts these much subtler levels of mind. Now, most of us in this life, unless we give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll and go to the mountains, we're not going to access this. It takes intense hard work. And in the long term, to achieve this goal of Buddha, free of all the rubbish, full of all the goodness, you need to access that subtler level of mind. So anyway, how to apply this approach in daily life. How is it beneficial to me, not to mention other people, if I work on my mind and try to change that as well, indeed, as well as the outside world? That's okay. Get your hubby to behave nicely. I'm happy. It's okay. Get your kids to behave nicely. Definitely. If you can change the red light to green, please do it. But to see the advantage to oneself, forget to other people. Not to hear it as a moralistic, religious thing, but to look at the advantages to me of knowing my own mind, becoming familiar with my own thousands of thoughts and feelings and emotions, learning to navigate them, learning to unpack and unravel them, and begin slowly to recognize, and this is the key point in Buddhist psychology, that all these emotions we feel is what we call them: anger, depression, anxiety. These emotions that we know are painful, at that level, we can't do much about them. So that's why we think it's really puzzling to try and change these emotions. But the point is this: when we learn some semblance of concentration, a little bit, start the day even with a 5-minute concentration technique, sit there for 5 minutes and with determination simply observe the breath, for example. You anchor your mind to the breath. You train yourself not to wander all over the place. It's a training. Even that little amount of work every morning, you learn gradually to bring into your life while you're doing the dishes, while you're driving the car, while you're talking to your kids, while you're talking to the next door neighbor. You start to develop the ability to not just notice what they are saying and what the outside world is doing, but you start to observe what is going on in this crazy mind of ours. So initially it's quite scary. I mean, they say in the texts, when you begin even to do this single-pointed concentration, which is a technique that's described in terms of 9 stages of cultivation, that even the sign of success at the first of the 9 is that you think your mind's getting more crazy. But actually it's not. It's just that you are noticing. It's like if you've never eaten good food, you just eat all the rubbish junk food, you're 20 kilos overweight, you're sick, you've got acid reflux, you've got aching bones. You kind of know the pain, but you've never paid attention to what is going on in your body, really. And then you start to live it, change your habits and go to the gym and go on nutrition, and you're suddenly going to notice muscles you didn't know you had. You're going to notice pains you never saw before. They've always been there, but now you're paying attention. The same with our mind, which is why we need to have courage to do this job, because we can't stand when we are angry, jealous, fearful. We know we can't stand it. We blame the outside, but we can't bear the pain. So we do all we can to push it away, or not deal with it, or blame somebody else for it, or live in guilt. So this is a practical issue of learning to start the day with a bit of focus, and then you bring to bear the skill that you developed in the morning, where you won't buy into all your thoughts, you just let them come and go. Then during the day, you start to develop the ability to notice your thoughts while you're washing the dishes. And the point I'm getting to, you're going to start to learn to notice the thoughts, the conceptual stories that inform the angry emotion, the jealous emotion, the anxiety emotion. You're going to catch the thoughts before it becomes emotional. This is the brilliant skill that we can learn to develop, you know. We just assume when you're fully blown in anger, what can I do? Nothing. When you're completely having a panic attack, there's nothing I can do. And you are right. At that point, there's nothing much you can do except damage control. For me, the analogy is a bit like you've got a nice car and you've never heard of mechanics. You don't know such a thing exists. So you don't pay attention to what's happening in the car. You just drive it as this absolute self-existent thing that's always going to be perfect. And then one day you're on the freeway, you know, I don't know if you like the Germans use Swedes, maybe you go 180 kilometers an hour in the fast lane. But if you're 180 kilometers an hour in the fast lane and you suddenly realize, oh my goodness, my wheels are falling off. Well, it's a bit late, don't you think? A bit stupid. But that's how we are with our emotions. We are unbelievable. Because that's when we go to the therapist. In other words, if you start to work on your mind and noticing what's happening before it gets emotional, and you get annoyed. Well, annoyance is the beginning of anger, you know. I'll explain this in a minute. So then you get annoyed, and then let's say you go to your therapist, who's your mechanic, remember? Oh, I got annoyed today. And you say to you, in other words, your mechanic, oh, my wheels wobbled today. Well, your mechanic will take you seriously. And well, that's a really good thing you've noticed. Let's fix your wheels before they fall off. No, your therapist will laugh at you and tell you to go home and come back when you want to kill your husband. In other words, come back when your wheels are falling off. That's our attitude to therapy, with respect. We don't think of it as maintenance. You don't, you know, if you're happy, if I'm in love with Giannis and everything is going perfectly, and I think I better go to a therapist and get some techniques, she will laugh at me. What do you want to come to me for? You're happy. No, you're learning. What we need to learn, which is the Buddhist approach, is to know your mind intimately and well before the problems come. It's so intelligent, but it's like a revelation to us in our culture, psychologically, because we wait till it's too late. No wonder we kill ourselves. No wonder we kill each other. Think about this. Because we don't even pay attention until the wheels actually are falling off. That's the big problem. And look at the level of suffering we have in our culture. Look at it, you know. So one problem, like I said before, that prevents us from looking inside is because we think the outside is the problem. But the other one is that even if we do look inside, we think it's concrete. We think it's set in stone. I mean, you analyze this. We think in our sort of models of the mind, certainly in neuroscience, certainly in psychology, when we think about an ordinary person, we think an ordinary person, a reasonable person, would have some anger, some fear, some jealousy, some attachment, some love, some compassion, some kindness. A little bit of everything. In other words, we give equal status to these states of mind. This is the radical difference for the Buddha. And it takes a while to hear this because it sounds almost too shocking. We can't imagine a person who didn't have anger or jealousy or depression. We would actually think they're mentally ill. So we've really got to question our assumptions here, you know. So first of all, we think it's somebody else's fault. Second, we think we're allowed to be these things because it's not my fault. And then third, we think they're set in stone. You can't change them. What do you mean, change my anger? These are what are preventing us, you know, from looking inside, becoming familiar with the thousands of thoughts and feelings and emotions. Initially, it's just chaos. It's like unedited chaos, isn't it? Never stopping from the second we wake up in the morning until the time we go to sleep at night. there's constant thoughts. And if nothing dramatic is happening, we manage our lives nicely. But behind everything is never stopping, never stopping, never stopping. And we don't pay attention until they're screaming, We have to learn to pay attention sooner and start to be in charge of them. And it's the hardest job we'll ever do, but it is doable. That's the point, So I think I need you to ask me some questions now. Let's have some discussion. Who's that? Who's at the centre? Hello, who's that?
Oh, hello, Robina. My name is Conan.
Conan.
Yes.
Happy to see you, Conan. Talk to me.
Yeah, regarding anger, is anger never justified, you think?
It's a really good question, so let's really look at it carefully, okay? Thank you so much. Excellent question. This question gets us to look into real detail about the Buddha's analysis and division into so-called negative or neurotic states of mind and positive, valid, useful states of mind. This is exactly, that question needs this explanation. And Conan, it takes time because, like I'm saying before, we have these assumptions in our models of mind and in our own feelings about what anger is, etc., etc. And as your question, is there it can be justified. So what it means is we have to define what is anger. Okay. For the Buddha, all these unhappy states of mind that are all rooted in fear, as far as he's concerned, they've got this particular characteristic of being very disturbing to oneself, forget other people, and the crucial one is they are distorted interpretations of something. So all these delusions, one of the words in Buddhist psychology for these unhappy states of mind, have a particular function of exaggerating something. So like I've been saying, Conan, if I'm in love with, Yanis, attachment. Okay, the Buddha talks about many, many unhappy negative states of mind, but he narrows them all down to 3. The root delusion, as they call it, the root delusion is so subtle we can't even see it initially, is this primordial, concrete sense of a separate, lonely, fear-based self, very deep in our bones. On the basis of this, the main one in daily life, and in order to understand anger, Conan, we need to understand this one. This is called attachment. This is multifaceted. It's primordial energy of dissatisfaction. I don't have enough. I'm not enough. No matter what I get, it's not enough. No matter how much Yanis tells me he loves me, it's not enough. No matter what I do, it's not enough. And if it's really deep, I am not enough. And in our culture, we call that self-hate. This is primordial in all of us. So, in general, though, attachment is like this junkie in us that is always hungry to get the nice things. It can only cope with the nice things, which means it only wants what I want. So if we can understand attachment energy, Conan, always this hunger inside us to get every second of the day, to get the nice sound, the nice smell, the nice taste, Yanis to do what I want when I want it, the light to be green when I want it. And this is the point, Yanis, Conan, when attachment doesn't get what it wants, and you could say it's 1,000 times a day, it mightn't be very dramatic, and that's when we don't notice it. The response when attachment doesn't get what it wants is aversion. This is the bare bones state of mind that is the exact opposite of this emotional hunger, always hungry to get something nice, and then unhappy and aversion when we don't. So when it's very strong, a volatile level of aversion, that's called anger. Shout and yell. So in the sense of identifying the poison, identifying this one of the poisons, identifying this neurotic, I-based, fear-based, deluded, ridiculous state of mind. That's what they mean by anger. Now, what we do is, because we throw the baby out with the bathwater. When we hear that Buddha says anger is not helpful, then we chuck out anger. We then think we throw out any criticism. We throw out finding fault. We become an idiot. No. Let's say you see some injustice out there. Let's say you see some guy kick the dog. Well, forget that. Bigger picture. I remember Martin Luther King was so powerful. He said, it is good to find fault. It is good to see there is injustice in the world. Look at the sexism. Look at the racism. Look at the poverty. So now, if anger is the next one, then we would shout and yell and enrage and get upset, and then we would try to find the person who is the blame, and then we'll try to harm the person who is the blame. That's the aspect of when it's just anger. When the criticism, you're right in seeing injustice, but if it becomes anger, it ends up just making a mess. Whereas if you see the injustice, as Martin Luther King said, it's good to see the wrong things, but then you say, what can I do to help? That's completely different. So it's the same. So anger, we think it is also meaning finding fault. So if I think I'm supposed to give up anger and then you start kicking the dog, I think, oh, I'm not supposed to get angry, therefore I don't do anything. No, that's nihilism. So we have to make the distinction, and this is always the Buddha's point, between the neurotic aspect of the mind and the positive one. So the positive aspect of this, another way to put it, Conan, I see myself, for example, I'm an angry type person, okay? When I was a little girl, my mother didn't have to teach me. I knew how to be angry. I was very good at it. So that would mean the moment I didn't get what I wanted, scream, shout, yell. That's the typical example of anger. And we can see how destructive it is. But the Buddhist approach, another way of talking is, we can see another way of putting it, there's a good side and a bad side. We could say it that way, although technically they don't say it that way. So I can see in my own mind, I've got this kind of volatile energy. You can see me. I shout, I yell, I talk fast. But you can learn to stop the angry, frustrated, emotional, I-based energy, and you can use this ability to criticize, because think about it, angry people are very good at criticism. Well, use it in a good way, just like Martin Luther King said. There is a problem there. How can I fix it? Then it turns into something useful. So am I communicating, Conan? Are we getting somewhere in our discussion?
Yeah, thank you.
Good, okay. But it's a very fine point, because we have to first understand the Buddhist view in this utter distinction between, if you like, using the analogy of botany, we've got to distinguish between the herbs and the weeds. Initially, if we don't know botany, I can't tell a herb from a weed. I wouldn't have a clue because I don't know botany. But when you learn botany, you can see the difference. So initially, you must distinguish what a weed is, and you know you don't want the weeds. But let's put it this way, when you're a really good botanist, maybe you can find use for the weeds. But you've got to first establish what the weeds are and be very cautious with them. So the very first level of practice, we have to see the difference between the neurotic, deluded, I-based states of mind. If they run out of control, this is why there is suffering on the planet. Look at the world. Look at the world. But it's only a person who knows their mind well and has subdued their mind and understands it properly, then at a more sophisticated level, we can see at another level, we can use this mind, use these different levels of our mind, It's very skillful. Good, thank you so much. What else?
Venerable Robina.
Hello, Brian, in Los Angeles.
Hello. Venerable, when we speak about fear, anger, depression,
yes,
anxiety, all of these things, part of the goal of meditation or single-pointed concentration, are we trying to sort of recognize these thought bubbles as they arise, to try and control them before they affect us physically? Is that part of the process?
I hear you, Brian, exactly. So, okay, single point of concentration itself is a very specific, kind of narrow, brilliant, but very specific technique. And it's simply to learn to train your mind to stay focused on one thing. So why, in the long term, is because you need to use, when you've eventually got it, this effortless focus to then really do the job, like laser-like focus, to do the job of using discursive thought to then unpack and unravel the seeming chaos in here. We can't even know what's going on because it's all too loud and shouting, and we can't tell the difference of all the crazy thoughts. But if you've got laser-like focus, you then use that focus in a discursive proactive way to really, it's like a microscope of your mind that can then really look into what's going on and see, and then learn to know how to change it. So in daily life, even 5 minutes of simply doing your single point of concentration in the morning, the job is merely to stay focused, not to, so the thoughts are going to come and they're going to go. Your job is not to analyze them. Your job is not to identify them. Your job is not to involve in them. Your job is not to make them go away. You simply, it's like you're in a room and next door you've got a crazy 100 people shouting and yelling. Instead of getting involved, getting angry, getting upset, wishing they weren't there, you just stay focused on what you're doing, and then as you grow your focus, the thoughts will have less power. Now, the job of concentration at the time you're doing it is to focus, but you use the skill of that focus in your daily life. Forget a really advanced meditation. Like I said before, once you've developed the skill to step out of your head even for 5 minutes, then during the day, while you're doing the dishes, while you're working, when normally we're paying no attention at all until the wheels fall off, you're starting to notice the thoughts, and now you can be proactive about them. But in concentration meditation, you're not doing anything with them. You're just watching the breath. But in daily life, you've got that skill of developing a bit of focus that enables you to then hear the crazy thoughts before they vomit out your mouth, or before you're lying in bed inert with depression. And you're doing your cognitive, Buddha's a cognitive therapist. The concentration is just laser-like focus, no discursive. But in the daily life and then in formal meditation, you'd use the skill to then unpack and unravel. And you do some very dynamic, I'm trying to make it simple, inner work. Do you understand what I'm saying? No, but you have conversations with yourself. You notice the anger coming. Oh, shut up, Brian. Give it a break, mate, before it comes out the mouth. And then you subdue it, and then it's gone. But we hold on to it. We wait. And if you're not an angry person, it'll build up, and then one day you wonder why you're depressed. So concentration is merely to focus. You're training yourself to stay focused. And then you use that skill the second you get off your cushion, and then formally in a more advanced meditation. Are you with me or not? That's called insight.
Yes.
That second mode is called insight. You're developing insight into what the hell is going on in your mind. And that's a very proactive, hands-on job. In daily life, don't make it formal like on a cushion. While you're on the toilet, while you're driving, while you're washing the dishes, eventually that skill enables us to see what's happening all the time, and you start to become in control of it. You become the boss before it vomits out the mouth, before you're in bed inert. That's the point. And don't hold your breath, it'll take a while. But that's the job. What do you think? Clear?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good, darling. Thank you, Brian. What else, people? Any more questions? This is so important to ask questions. Simple little questions like this, and then we can unpack it all. It's so important. What else, please?
I would like to get back to the good and bad parts of anger.
Good, Lena. Yes, go for it.
So I've had people close to me who have been ill in different ways. It's been getting old, lonely, and dementia, and other kind of mental illnesses. And sometimes when people are they are in such a difficult position in life, yes, where they cannot defend themselves.
That's right.
And their anger is desperate.
Their anger.
And some people, yes, and some people they never get angry because they are not even recognizing themselves, yes, as yes, beings.
Yes.
So then when the anger arrives,
yes,
I kind of go, yes, you're there, hooray, welcome. And this sounds like some kind of 5 penny, 1 penny, or whatever penny.
So I understand.
But it's somehow like, yes, okay, you finally stated that you're
hear you.
There's a limit,
yes,
and you're getting angry.
Yes.
And this is, I just need to, and also other people in a desperate, very, very, yes, they are not able to put up their voice.
I hear you, Lena. I hear
the
you.
only voice left.
Yes, I hear you loud and clear. I hear you loud and clear. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so now let's just talk about it from our own point of view. Forget about another person, whether they're whatever it is, but it'll be all the same discussion. So this very first level of practice in Buddhism, First of all, before we even start to look at the mind, this is interesting now. You know, the Buddha's general statement, general analysis is that there are these neurotic, deluded, I-based, fear-based, really unhappy, really disturbing, really delusional states of mind that he has found are not at the core of our being, are the source of our suffering, and can be removed. This is the long-term big picture. So taking that as the view, then he's learned that we can get rid of the weeds and grow the flowers, speaking really simply. So the first level of practice, taking that view, is not even yet looking at our mind. There's different levels of practice they present in the Tibetan packaging of all the Buddha's teachings. And there's a way of the gradual levels of practice. And the first level, they've got another term for it, but I like to use the term, it's junior school. Then you go to high school. Then you go to university. And there's postgraduate. There's different levels of practice. Now, the very first level of practice, before we even begin to work on the mind, is to control the servants of the mind. So look at the world in a general sense, and we can see that people with their body and their speech, they do harm. I mean, join the universe. People lie, steal, kill, torture, rape, harm. It's evident to anybody. And the source of these is ego grasping, attachment, anger, jealousy, arrogance, pride. Buddhism doesn't do the external analysis of what your mother did to you. Buddhism looks directly at the mind of each person. And this is a very direct way to see it. Very, very direct and powerful way. So this is our job. So the very first level of the job, is to control the body and speech, control the servants of the anger, the servants of the attachment. That already is a profound level of practice. That's why the fundamental first starting point in Buddhism is good ethics. Don't kill, don't steal, don't jump on another partner, don't badmouth your boyfriend. In other words, keep your mouth shut. Now that's pretty intense, and already in a way, Lena, we're talking here a person who's reasonable. We're not talking about a person like you're talking, who's suffering intensely, most people don't even know what they feel. So this is already advanced. To even have a conscious decision to have good ethics because you don't want to make a mess, that's a pretty stable kind of person. Many people never shout, never yell, but they're the ones you're talking about. We're not even discussing them yet. You get my point here? We're talking about a regular person who's got enough self-awareness to understand. That's the first level. Next level, now we become our own therapist. That's the high school. Now because we've subdued the servants of anger and attachment, now we can unpack and unravel the anger and the attachment itself. That's the real job of distinguishing between the weeds and the herbs, and this is really pretty intense job. So the result of even just this job, these two, this is the wisdom wing. And the result is we become stable, fulfilled, content, joyful, and then therefore more loving and more compassionate. This is the logical progression of classical levels of practice. We're communicating, right? Now, when we look at the world, most people, Lena, don't even know what goes in their mind. Not to mention, don't know that what goes on in their mind plays any role at all. So this is where, from our side, where compassion comes in. And so you're absolutely right. So there's a person, let's say, in a victim relationship. They're allowed themselves because they're terrified of living in fear. They're being bullied and harmed and beaten, and they never open their mouth. That's such a classic example of a suffering human being. They look like they're nice people, but nothing comes out. So for that person, when they go to the therapist, the best thing in the world, like you said, yes, bring it on. But they've been so scared to show their anger because the deepest attachment for the Buddha is our attachment to being seen as a good girl. This keeps us paralyzed. So for a person who's never expressed anything and who's sitting in a victim relationship, being bullied all their life, absolutely that person has to allow themselves to even dare to say, how dare you do that to me? And in the safe environment of a good friend, that's not anger. It is anger, but it's powerful and it's wise. And then you move on from there. So it's much more nuanced, but you understand the difference of what I'm saying. So if we just hear it in a concrete way, oh, you're not allowed to be angry, we'll just go around suffocating ourselves and go crazy. And that's often what happens when we misuse religion. We hear it as fundamentalist. You're a naughty person, so we never express anything, and there's no awareness. This is really unconscious. This is awful. Are we communicating, Lena? So I know for me, my friends in prison, this is why These crazy guys. I mean, there's, you know, some, when I first met people in prison in the 1950s, 1990s, not 50s, these young Mexican American ex-gangsters in prison reading Buddhist books. And I mean, this one guy, I remember met him, Richie, he wrote to me and said he'd been in gangs all his life, and like being a Mexican gangster in Los Angeles, your job is to kill men and rape women. I think now they've got equal rights, they kill women as well. So it's kind of like, but whatever, you understand. So I met him in the 90s and I went to see him. He wrote a letter and he said he was very angry type of person. He's very laid back and relaxed, he said, but when he gets angry, he gets very angry. So I met him eventually, and there he was. I saw him with the glass between us. He was in top security, had the phones, you know, and covered in tattoos, which is the typical gangster thing in the Mexicans. So I said to him, "How's your anger, Richie?" So he kind of blushed under his tattoos, and he said, "Oh, Robina, I had a fight with my cellmate this morning, and I put his head down the toilet." And then he said, quite innocently, "Oh, but Robina, I took it out again." So I thought, wow, you know, amazing. He didn't kill a fourth person. So there's this maniac dude in prison, a gangster, a murderer, and I was so moved by that. He didn't kill a fifth person. So that was anger, but look what he did with it. I rejoiced. I was delighted. I love working with my friends in prison who are violent, crazy people, but who've got the good heart and want to work with what they are, you know. So we shouldn't be scared of anger. And because anger is something I've understood in my life very clearly, and I think not to be afraid of it is really powerful. Because like I said before, the deepest attachment, more than for sex, drugs and rock and roll, the most primordial attachment we all have is this utter hunger every second to be seen and to be liked by others, to be approved of by others, to be liked by others. In other words, the irony of attachment in Buddhism is it's a symptom of a half a person. We don't even have any value in ourselves, and we always crave other people to say, "I'm a nice girl." So this can suffocate most of us, and we don't even know what we feel and can't make any choices because we're too scared to even look, because we say we don't want to upset people. No, we don't want people to dislike us. This is very primordial. What do you think, Lena? Does it make sense? Say something.
Yes, it definitely does make sense.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Anyway, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? And we've got to start with simple. You've got to start, when you learn botany, you've got to learn the simple things. What's a weed and what's a flower? Try to distinguish. And then as we get more sophisticated, we can do something more skillful with what's going on in the garden, can't we? It's one step at a time, you know. And then, Lena, we can help others. Because if I don't know my mind, how can I help you? If I don't know my garden, how can I help you with your garden? That's why always the wisdom wing has to come first. Then I can be of benefit to others. And that's what I see with myself, knowing, understanding I'm a volatile person, understanding anger, not being afraid of it, understanding my own delusions, then it's easy for me to help people in prison. I love these guys, and they kind of understand that I understand them, you know. It's not a fundamentalist kind of be a nice person thing. It's much more nuanced than that. Thank you so much, people. What else is there?
Could I ask you a question?
Yes, please do. Absolutely, Marianne.
Yeah. The headline of this seminar is how to stay resilient during a period of pandemic.
Yes.
And I think I would like to listen to you. How do you think that we are dealing with that? Because I think this question of anger,
yes,
of course, that is one part of it.
Yes.
But and some people are getting terrified, I think, yes, and also being very angry. But another part are getting a relief and a pause in their lives.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it?
And I think on the social, on the bigger level, we are all being very influenced in very different ways in what is happening around us.
Yes.
And one thing is that we can take care of what's going on in me and in my mind and my conscious mind. Mm-hmm. But how do we deal with all these emotions and everything that's going on in society and or around us to stay more or less sane, I think.
I think, so yes, Mary, that's been in my mind as I've been talking. So what I've been doing is just talking in general, the Buddhist approach. that the more we work internally and be able to unpack and unravel what is going on inside us, what that does is bring the resilience. And when things do go wrong, even so, we start with the small things. Don't wait till the pandemic comes, but start with the small things, like I've been saying. When your husband doesn't do what you want, when you break the cup washing dishes. It sounds silly, but I don't mean it like that. If we can work with the things that go wrong in the small way and learn to not control, but to work with and navigate what's going on inside and look at the frustration and look at the anger and learn to change it, then when the big things come, we are able, we stay more stable, and we can become more empathetic and be of benefit to others without going crazy. That is really the broad point that I'm trying to make. By the Buddhist approach is by working on, not just by the wisdom wing. The Buddhist approach isn't just taking care of yourself. It means doing the inner work of the way Buddhism would describe practice, controlling, having a practice every day, controlling your body, controlling your speech. Don't just vomit out every word you feel. Be aware of the mind, of what's informing your speech. Be aware of the thoughts, be aware of the anger, and then learn to change them. Learn to change them. That's the actual job of being a Buddhist, actually. And the benefit to oneself is more stability, more contentment, more clarity, and therefore more empathy and more courage and ability to deal with the dramas out there without going crazy. That's really the essence of what I've been trying to convey, Marianne. Does that make sense or not?
Yeah, it definitely does. So we can see this period as a real trial.
That's right, exactly.
An examination.
Exactly,
right now.
exactly.
How far we have come.
Yeah. That's right, Marianne. And you feel, I think with many people, this has been an amazingly good time. For some people, it's been really taking care of the inside. But for many others, it's really strengthened exactly that their resilience in the face of problems and their ability to have empathy and to help others. I'm so moved by the stories in all of course, in the papers, it tells good stories now. Children, older people who are taking care of others now, who aren't just going crazy themselves, taking this opportunity to reach out and have empathy and realizing, this is what I find a very powerful point, realizing that if we can develop empathy and compassion, that just doesn't benefit other people, that benefits oneself. That's really powerful. I remember sometimes one of the biggest things I think in our culture, we feel if we go around helping other people, we say, well, what about me? As if we're being left out. But I always remember when I first heard all the Buddhist teachings, and I heard the way they talk about the levels of compassion and empathy that we can cultivate, they were so high, I thought it sounded like a saint. I couldn't get hold of it. It was too much for my mind, you know. But I remember the Dalai Lama saying, if you want to help others, practice compassion. If you want to help yourself, practice compassion. So what I notice is the people who are able to get out there and benefit others, they themselves are joyful. But if we go out there and try to help others, but driven by our own need to be seen to be a good girl, that's when we get used as a doormat. That's when we get depressed and feel like we're being misused by other people. So that's the wisdom wing, is sort out yourself first, and then empathy comes easily and naturally, and you are the beneficiary as well as the others. What do you think, Marianne? Does it make sense?
It really makes sense. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
But of course, all this is great to talk about, but it's like anything. You can talk about a lovely cake, but you've got to go and then make it, you know, learn the recipe and then do it oneself. But it seems to me that I find in our culture, we despair so easily, especially young people. It's heartbreaking. In Melbourne, I've got a friend who's a student of the same teachers as me, and she has an acting studio. And one of the young students killed herself recently. So we had a class, and the mother was there. And it's just so heartbreaking, you know, that when things do go wrong, and we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, we can't see any potential in ourselves, and we can't see anything in the outside world. That is unbearable. And I feel that's our struggle in our culture. We concretize it all, so we have no resilience in the face of dramas. We think it's never going to end, and we think we can't change anything. This is the tragedy, you know. So for me, it's to give people enthusiasm and some kind of confidence. I feel this from the Buddhist teaching, this myself personally, that at least we've got some potential, at least to have optimism about your own potential, and then no matter how bad things get, you won't give up. Not giving up, I think, is really powerful quality. Because life is terrible. Life is very suffering.
And that's contagious to other people.
Say that again, Marianne.
Det smittar.
Say it again.
It's contagious.
Yes, that's
It's
right.
con-
Exactly. And we need, you know, this is where, if we're trying to help a person who's depressed, and you just show them love. Don't try to answer all their problems. Just show them love and sort of mirror back to that person their own beauty and their own potential. That's such a powerful gift, you know, and we can do that one-on-one. We can't change the whole world, but we can do whatever we can with that one person in front of us. Give them courage, give them confidence, show them it's possible. For me, that's very powerful. Thank you so much, Marianne. What else, you people? We have a whole hour more. We don't have to use it, but we can.
I raised my hand and
Oh yes, where are you? Which hand is that? Who is that talking?
This is Celeste.
Hello, Celeste. Talk to me, darling.
Yes, great. I'm very, thank you, Venerable.
Yes.
Beautiful to meet Van again.
Good.
My question has to do with what Van, I think it was one of the questions that leads to anger, and I would like to go on this understanding on the why the need of be accepted or looking for validation.
You mean why do we
Yeah,
have it? Why do we have it is what you're
Yeah.
asking. It's a really good question.
Codependence, which leads
Yes.
to codependence, right? Yeah.
What are you saying? Codependence.
This is what leads more for the codependency
You mean-
situation of
In relationships, you mean?
relationship, but also in the social relationship, this not mindful interrelations that make the people, for example, I see sometimes people who are having good art, but they influenced by people who have not good motivation, and they motivate them to do bad actions.
I see what you're
Because
saying.
They want
Yes,
to be
yes.
accepted.
I hear what you're saying.
They want to be accepted.
Yes,
But-
Celeste. This is huge. I mean, this is the gang mentality. This is the deepest, I think the deepest, most primordial attachment. I mean, I know we're working with all my Mexican gangster friends. And in the prisons, you know, the black gangs, the white gangs, everything is to do with feeling part of something. In a good way, it is marvelous to feel part of something. That's the virtuous side of it. But the unhappy side of it, and this is quite a subtle point, Celeste. It's quite a deep point, and I'm just using my words to try and express the Buddhist view. So the fundamental mistake in Buddhism, this seems quite subtle, is this sense, this deepest ego grasping, they use this term colloquially, this primordial mistaken sense, a wrong sense of self. We can call that ego if you like, that's concrete, solid, fear-based, and it causes us to have this fierce sense of us being separate, of being cut off, lonely, bereft, separate. It's so primordial that we don't really, we take it so much for granted as something normal, we don't even identify it. This is the Buddhist view, and the most subtle mistake that our mind makes. They call this ego grasping. So the main voice of that ego grasping is this attachment, and that's this energy of hunger, emotional hunger. So why would you be hungry for something? Because you feel you are missing something. That's the deepest energy of this ego grasping. So then the next one is this, as I was saying, it gives rise to this huge emotional hunger. So it's based upon dissatisfaction, a primordial feeling of I am not enough, I don't have enough, whatever I get is not enough. We understand this so deeply in our ordinary daily life. Look at how we think about everything. Whatever we have, it's not enough. We get something and we're still hungry, so we get something else. We're still hungry. This is never ending. It's so utterly, completely there all the time. This is what Buddha means by attachment. So, of course, the obvious level of attachment, this emotional hunger, is for sex and drugs and rock and roll, for the external objects of the senses. That's pretty evident, and that can be pretty intense All of us are like this. This is the junkie mind, but it's a question of degree. Now, some people have it more severely, and the dominant way they suffer from attachment is for alcohol or heroin or whatever it might be. It could be sex for some people. It could be money for some people. It could be, but then there's a more subtle level of attachment, the deepest one that is linked completely to this sense of a separate self, is this sense of not being, it sounds so corny. This attachment is like a symptom of a half a person. So the deepest attachment we have, the deepest emotional hunger, is for someone out there in front of me to validate, to look back at me and smile at me and say, Robina, that's a good idea. Robina, you are a nice person. Robina, I like your thoughts. So in other words, attachment is a symptom of such low self-esteem that we have no courage and no confidence to think what I think is enough. It's also mixed with, you can have different recipes. So we've all got attachment and we've all got anger. We've all got all of these diseases, Buddha says, but they're in different categories, different recipes, So some people have a lot more rage. Some people have a lot more arrogance. Some people have a lot more kind of softness and humility, the good quality, let's say. So it's all different. But this fundamental energy of this attachment, the deepest one, is to be seen and validated and heard by others. So the answer why, Celeste, is because of the deepest illusion of all. So when we've literally healed all these dramas, and this is putting modern words on Buddha's teachings, that's when you become a totally blissful person. You become utterly content, blissful, joyful, when you've given up attachment, given up anger, given up jealousy, given up the neuroses, because you've healed yourself. You've become a whole person. We kind of know these words. This is putting modern words on what Buddha is saying is possible, So the deepest one, and that's either in your relationship with your mother, in relationship to the gang mentality, you've got to be approved of. You've got to act like the other people, have the gang mentality. You have to, or we call it in Australia, the mob mentality. Everybody follows the biggest mob, That people seem over there to be the West ones. Oh, I'll agree with them. And then we've got no certainty in ourselves. We've got no confidence even in who we are, even what we want. We are totally unconscious, I don't know if we recognize any of this, people, do we? I think we recognize all of this. What do you think, Celeste?
Marvelous. Thank you so much.
Celeste, it's a wonderful story, Celeste. They say the yogis in the mountains who've really given up everything, given up sex, drugs, rock and roll, really seriously doing the job of becoming a Buddha. They say that still, up in the mountains, they've given up everything, but they're still thinking of what the people in the village are thinking about them. This is so primordial, we don't even notice it. There's conversations in our head all day, and this is what causes us to have many people, it causes us to have so much fear to even acknowledge what we think. So Lena, the people Lena's talking about, never had a voice because they've been terrified of upsetting the world. And this is the tragedy for all of us. Another aspect of this, I remember hearing about one Australian nurse who worked with the dying, and she wrote a book, The 5 Greatest Regrets of the Dying. And the greatest regret was that I didn't follow what I knew I wanted to do. I did what I thought other people expected me to do. This is the greatest loss. We all have this. We have no courage, We don't even know what we want, not to mention not follow it, because we're afraid of what other people think. It sounds kind of corny, but it is primordial, and this is the deepest attachment, the deepest pain. What do you think?
Gratitude. So what is the best form to cut through this?
Who's asking this? Who's asking this?
This is me, Celeste. What is the best form to cut through this?
Sweetheart, it's not
pervasive ignorance.
I know. This is the whole Buddhist path. I'm just talking in a casual way about the way we suffer. But in the end, it's like I'm talking about cakes. Delicious cakes and different recipes. The solution is you've got to go to cooking school. There's no shortcut. There's no shortcut. You've got to go one step at a time. You know, the classic Buddhist approach. That's up to you. You'd start to control, you'd learn to control your mind, control your body, control your speech. You'd live in vows, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie. You start by controlling the servants of your mind. Now you can go to high school and start to become your own therapist and start at the level we are, working slowly, 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 slowly. In the Buddhist approach, it's all mapped out. It's a course from here to Buddhahood. It's all mapped out. It's all mapped out, one step at a time. So that's up to us to follow those steps if we wish. But the general energy of it is to start to become conscious at first of our uncontrolled behavior, because that what's driving our body and speech is our mind. We want to get to the mind, but if your body and speech are uncontrolled, if the servants are out of control, what can you do with your mind? So that's why living in good ethics, controlling your body, controlling your speech. Don't just vomit every word you feel. Don't just stuff every piece of cake in your mouth. Don't just jump on every boy you feel like it. It's not punitive. It's not moralistic. It's really practical psychology. We're trying to harness our energy so that, as Lama Zopa says, we can mold our mind into any shape we like. It's called practice, one step at a time. What else, people?
Yes, hello.
Hello there, Venerable. Hello, Venerable. Happy to meet you.
Hello, nice to see you. You have already spoken about this, but 3 words came up in my mind. Impermanence, hope and fear.
Yes.
If you elaborate, please, about impermanence and hope and fear.
Yeah, well, hope.
You have already done it. But
no,
still.
absolutely. Thank you very much. It's another way of framing anger, attachment, and anger. So let's look a bit more at this Buddhist analysis of these 3, they call them the 3 poisons. I mean, in fact, in Buddhism, they always talk about how Buddha has identified at least 84,000 distinct mental problems. It's hilarious, you know, it's like a map of the mind. But he narrows them all down to 3. And this initially sounds very kind of cute. It sounds very simplistic. If we compare with all these you know, really abstract analyses in modern psychology and modern psychotherapy and modern psychiatry, just saying our main problems are ignorance, attachment, and aversion sound like a joke. Sounds so simplistic. But let's look at them. And we've been describing already. And another way of framing it, Venerable's point is, you know, because ego grasping, the root one, which is they know this main delusion, this main neurotic state of mind, the deepest one, the most primordial, like I said before, which informs everything, its nature is fear. But if we then see its main voice is this attachment. So that's hope. Living in this constant attachment is anticipation, looking forward to something, expectation, you know, over exaggerating its deliciousness, thinking about it all the time. It's in this neurotic kind of hope. There's a good hope, it's okay, but neurotic, living in always this will come, and then I'll do this, and then I'll do that. So what is underneath that is this constant neediness for a feeling of pleasure to come, a feeling of happiness, a feeling of satisfaction. That the next will do it, the next cake, the next boy, the next job, the next cup of tea, always looking forward. And there's constantly this driven by this emotional hunger. That's the hope one. We live in that one. And then fear of the thing of when attachment doesn't get what it wants. So ego grasping is the root. The main voice is this constant attachment, this hunger, this emotional one. And then when it doesn't get what it wants, which is 1,000 times a day, that's the panic attack of aversion. And now that's multifaceted. The anger, irritation, annoyance, frustration, and then despair and depression. There's a whole spectrum of this aversion. So that's the fear one, the panic, when attachment doesn't get what it wants, when hopes are not fulfilled. It's literally a panic attack. Depends on how the personality you have. It's either violent anger, or it's just annoyed, frustrated, or you suppress it, and eventually it's depression, you know. This is the 3 poisons, the 3 toxic emotions. Is that answering your question a little bit, Venerable?
And the impermanence of
now
it.
The impermanence one. Well, see, the very first teaching Buddha gave. First of all, it's so important to remember, when we think of religion in our world, we assume it means creator. We just assume that. The word religion for us equals creator. Not for Buddhism. You ask any Tibetan Are you religious? Oh, of course. Then you say, oh, you believe in a God? No, what are you talking about? So we get very confused. So this is so important. On the one hand, we can see in a cursory glance at Buddhism, it sounds just like Jesus Christ. Nothing wrong with Jesus Christ. I was a Catholic. I was very devoted. But there's a fundamental difference. I can't stress this enough. I asked my Jesuit priest friend, I always quote this, what by definition is a sin, a negative action, the Buddhist view. He said, by definition, a sin is doing what God said not to do. Now, this is crucial because that's based upon the philosophy that there is a being who wasn't created, who is existent, who's permanent, unchanging, and who is the source of the universe, who creates me, who creates the laws, who is the boss, in other words. So if that is true, and you have faith in a person like that, then it's true that what makes the actions you do negative is that because he said not to do them. Now, Buddha would also say, like Jesus, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie. Why? You've got to ask him why, and his reason is not the same. It's got nothing to do with the fact that he said it. He's a messenger. In the same way you go to your doctor, I'm coming to it, Venerable Lena. In the same way, if you go to your doctor and she says don't smoke, why not? Well, honey, you'll get cancer. She's not saying because I say so, and if you smoke, I'll give you cancer. That's laughable for the Buddha. There's no view like that in Buddhism. It's a natural law that if you smoke, you get cancer. So for Buddha, it's a natural law that if you kill, this will harm you. Because the Buddha's view of karma is every millisecond that what we think and do and say programs us, turns us into the person we become. There's no view of creator. There's no view of someone making us. Our mind is totally in the law of cause and effect, which is the law of impermanence. This is the universe as it is. No one runs it. It's not punitive. It's not punishment. It's not reward. This is fundamentally important to understand in Buddhist teachings. In other words, I remember one time in New Zealand, one scientist, he happened to be a scientist, he said, who revealed the teachings to the Buddha? And I said, would you ask Einstein who revealed the teachings of relativity to him? Everybody laughed, of course they did. But that's exactly the Buddha. It's not revelation. Buddha whatever Buddhism is something that a person called a Buddha has observed directly to be true. Just like Einstein. So you don't just believe Einstein, you prove him to be true by going through the same methodology. Same with the Buddha. So the first fundamental teaching he gave about reality is that, guess what, folks? Things change. So this is why he teaches us this, why he's giving us all these teachings, is because he's saying in our mind, one of the many primordial mistakes that we make because of ego is to, as Lama Zopa puts it, is to grasp at a permanent me. In other words, this terror, and this causes terror because then this leads to attachment to hold on to me and to mine, and we can't bear the thought that I will die, that he will die, that the relationship will end, the cup will break. So this grasping at things as permanent, unchanging, and therefore attached to that thing, and because of the attachment we can't bear that it will change. This is the basis of so much of our fear in life, so much of our suffering. In other words, we're living in denial of the evident reality that things are ephemeral. This doesn't mean you chuck the baby out with the bathwater and therefore go, oh, well, everything changes, I don't care. That's nihilism. But enjoy life, live life within the fact of its changingness. This is what brings joy and contentment, because you're not grasping. I mean, this is primordial. I'm always quoting Nicole Kidman. I'm not trying to be mean about the woman, that Australian actress, I love her. But when she was married to Tom Cruise, I remember reading an interview with her. And she said at the end of the interview, we will be together until we are 80. Now, we understand that. So the analysis is, there they are, karma came together, they've got this good relationship, they're loving, they're compassionate, they've got their life, they've got their children, they've got their life, this bubble. We've all got our life, our bubble, isn't it? So because of attachment is this junkie that only wants the nice things, and then because everything is nice, then guess what we do? We think it will be forever. Look at that one. This is so primordial. We will be together until we're 80, she said. I'm not criticizing, but this is exactly the functioning of grasping at things as permanent and attachment working together. So because attachment is a junkie that only wants the nice things. So she was at that time getting the nice things. Everything was going beautifully. So of course you're going to think it'll last forever, because you want it to last forever, because you can't bear the thought that it might change. This is why we suffer. So I remember that the next sentence she said, I remember this, she said, and if we aren't together until we're 80, I will be devastated. At least she said that as a possibility. So Buddha's essential point across the board is that we suffer because of these delusions in our mind. We think we suffer, she probably thought at the time that she suffered when Tom Cruise ran off with Penelope Cruz. No, she suffered like the rest of us because she believed it was permanent. Wow. And then the deepest grasping at permanence, of course, is being terrified of death. Because we can't bear the thought of not being me. We can't bear the thought, So this is why we suffer, because Buddha's saying we're not in touch with reality. We grasp at things as having, attachment over-exaggerates the deliciousness of the cake. It over-exaggerates its role in making me happy. We expect it to make me happy. We anticipate it to make me happy. And then when it doesn't, when the happiness does come for a moment, but then before you stop eating the cake, after you keep waiting for happiness, you now want to vomit. Where did happiness go? We're living in unreality, Buddha's saying. It sounds so cosmic to say it like that. When we analyze our mind, and this is the answer to Marianne, what do you do every day? This is the job you do, unpacking and unraveling our assumptions about how things exist. This is the job, every day. And don't believe in him. Believing in impermanence is like believing in botany. Don't be so ridiculous. You can believe in botany. It works. But if you can't do botany, you're useless, But we just think religious belief. This is just intellectual laziness, Buddha's either speaking the truth or he's not. And it's for us to find out, What do you think, Venerable? Did that do the job? Are you happy with that? Venerable disappeared.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you, darling. So basically, again, say the point. Buddha's basically telling us, every word in Buddhism is what he has found to be true from his own experience. He didn't make it up. It's not revelation. He didn't have a dream about it. It's not a vision. It's from his own direct observation, like Einstein. And if Einstein's wrong, he'll be happy to hear it from you. Same with the Buddha. And as the Dalai Lama says, if you decide to follow Buddha's methodology, practice it, internalize it, think it, do it, and begin to make what he says is real to be real for you, and you find at some point that what he says is wrong, of course you must reject him. So just blindly believing is intellectual laziness, and it just causes more fear. We've got to prove it to be true. Things either are impermanent or they're not. Things either have no intrinsic nature or they don't. Attachment is either right or valid or not. It's like it's a lot of inner work to do. We've got to squeeze our brains. But this is the first step, and then eventually it becomes experiential. This is being a Buddhist. And you don't have to call yourself a Buddhist. Don't worry about it, What else, people? To keep blowing my nose. Where's my tissue? Any more questions?
Robina,
Yeah.
can I ask you another question?
Good.
I just a couple hours ago, I become a little bit angry with my partner and so on, and you fail every day. What about this forgiveness and confessions? Is that a remedy, or we call it? I don't know. You're asking for forgiveness when you have failed, you have been angry, with your partner, and the confession part in Buddhism.
I understand. Good question. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Conan. Very good question. So that whole question, that's interesting. Let's look at it philosophically. That question, the way you framed it, and nothing wrong, but I'm just analyzing it, is you've got to ask, this concept of forgiveness is very interesting. When I was a Catholic, I was in love with God. I loved God, So so God was my creator. God was my boss. So this is the point about the purification process. Confession, we call it in Buddhism, as you know, is called purification. and it's a practice we would do at the end of every day. So the second step of it, we call it, the first step is regret. So you acknowledge, oh, I did this, I kicked the dog, I killed my boyfriend, I did whatever. You acknowledge you did something that's labeled negative, and why you acknowledge it and regret it isn't guilt, I'm a bad person. Not like that. It's because you know this Buddhist view of karma, and we haven't talked much about it, is that every second of what we think and do and say programs me. His Holiness the Dalai Lama calls karma self-creation. It's very tasty. So everything I think and do and say produces the person I become. So logically, I don't want suffering in the future. I don't want to become an angry, neurotic, mean, ugly person. So therefore, when I do things that will cause that, the first step is to acknowledge I did it to myself and regret to myself. I did kill, I did steal, I did lie, I did badmouth, and I regret having done that out of ignorance, because I've sown those seeds in my mind, and I don't want that suffering to ripen in the future. So regret is like compassion for yourself first, not guilt. We have guilt. Dalai Lama was asked, what's the difference between regret and guilt? So we go, he says, guilt is you look in the past and you say, I did this and I did that and I did this. But then automatically, and this is ego, we say, and then I'm a bad person. This is a disaster. We've got to really learn to change this one. This is a very deep instinctive conclusion, and it's totally useless. It's not helpful. It's not productive. He said instead, regret, this first part is the same. I did do this. I did kick the dog. I did badmouth. It's like the analogy of eating sugar. I did eat sugar. And then you say, oh my God, what a fool I was eating sugar. I regret having done that because I don't want diabetes. It's for your own sake. It's really powerful. I don't want future suffering. Therefore, I acknowledge and regret that I did the thing to cause it. That's the first step. Now, the second one. If I were a Christian, the second one is called reliance. I would then rely upon Jesus. I would go to Jesus and I would confess to Jesus. And then, this is the point, I would then beg Jesus to beg God to forgive me. Why? Because God is the boss. I went against God's wishes. So that's necessary and appropriate that I beg God to forgive me. Because I did what he said not to do. And that Jesuit priest said that's what the main thing that makes it wrong. He said there's some aspect of natural law. Let's say I killed the dog. No, you can kill a dog in Catholicism, it's okay. But if I kill my boyfriend, the main reason it was wrong for Christianity is because God said not to do it. So I must ask God to forgive me. And forgiveness is what purifies me. But if I'm a Buddhist, what I do is I acknowledge and regret I killed my boyfriend. Then I would turn to the Buddha as my doctor. I would rely upon Buddha, not as my creator. I would not ask Buddha to forgive me. He's a nice person. He would forgive me. But that's like asking your doctor to forgive you for eating sugar, and then she will stop you from getting cancer. That's not her job. That is not Buddha's job. This is an internal process. So the second step, I do rely upon the Buddha, but he's my doctor. I use Buddha's methods, but I purify myself. By the third step, and then I'd have compassion. The next step is to have compassion for those I've harmed. And then I would do a practice to purify that negative karma of mine. And then fourth step, I would resolve to not do it again. But I use Buddha, but not in the same way I would as a Christian. Because God, so do you see the difference first of all there before I continue, Conan? Does that make sense? Good, okay. Now, other interesting point, in our daily life, we put a lot of emphasis on forgiveness. And I think we can misuse forgiveness in different ways. Let me explain. So let's say where's my boyfriend? I've forgotten even his name. What's his name? Giannis, there he is. There's Giannis. So then let's say Giannis, I've been bad-mouthing Giannis. I've been mean to Giannis. So I do need in my own practice at the end of the day, we do this practice at the end of the day. Lama Zopa says we're insane not to do it every day. That's for my benefit and for me to increase compassion and to make a decision to stop bad-mouthing Giannis. I have to do that. Now, usually what we tend to do, I bad-mouth Giannis yet again, and then I'm driving to work and I'm having all this guilt, because I'm terrified Janus will give me up. It's just completely self-centered. So then I ring him up. I'm so sorry, Janus. Please forgive me. But this is really based upon, again, the attachment for approval. I'm terrified that Janus will no longer forgive me, and then I'll freak out. So usually our wish for forgiveness is is polluted by ego. Or so when as soon as Janus says, oh, it's okay, Robina, I still love you, I go, oh, phew, thank goodness, off the hook again. I've got away with it. This is not healthy. It's fine for Janus to forgive me, and it's good. I must forgive. I must ask for forgiveness. But if I don't try to change and stop bad-mouthing him, what's the point of forgiveness? It doesn't help. It's just ego. We misuse it, I'd say. So it's really important. It's necessary to ask, but to put it this way, what if he doesn't forgive me? Then where does that leave me? So if we rely on forgiveness, and that's the Christian view, and God will always forgive us, so we can rely upon that. But what if your friend doesn't forgive you? If we take the view that forgiveness is what purifies me, and let's say Janus doesn't forgive me, that means I'm living with poison. I'll kill myself. It's so terrible. So this is a really important point to get clear. I have to purify myself. I have to, in a sense, forgive myself. Then even if Janus never forgives me, it's okay. And this is why my friends in prison who've killed people, you can't bring the people back to life. They can't forgive you. So then many of them are completely depressed because I've killed somebody. I'm a bad person. I'll go to hell. So then they hear about the Buddhist purification process and they're very delighted with it because it's an internal process. So there's two things. One is I must ask Janus to forgive me. But if he's really my friend, if he really loves me, he would say, Robina, of course I forgive you, but you've got to change, baby. I'm sure God the same. You can't just keep asking God to forgive you and then keep killing. It doesn't work. At some point you can't do it. You've got to change, So the forgiveness part is not involved in the Buddhist one, but it's you can see how it would fit, So are you seeing what I'm saying, Corinne? Makes sense? Good. We need to understand, we need to unpack these concepts. There's a lot of assumptions I think we have that we don't really analyze, We don't question enough. We need to do this because there's some fundamental differences in these different approaches and we have to unpack them. It's important for it to become real for us, not just religious belief, What else, people? Yes, Marianne.
How do you look upon this period of pandemic from a philosophical point of view?
That's the karmic, well, I'll tell you the Buddhist view of karma. This is the world view in Buddhism, the view that kind of pervades the entire Buddhism is really a world view. Many people in the modern world mightn't know that because we don't study it, but it's this vast philosophical presentation of the entire universe. So because Buddha doesn't assert a creator, he's got his own view, and his own view is this: there's billions and billions and billions of consciousnesses, of minds. There's even a word in Buddhist psychology, mind stream. So, this kind of continuity of mental moments. Marianne's thoughts and feelings of this moment are mainly caused by the previous moment, which come from the previous moment, which come from the previous moment. It's this continuity of mental moments. And if you keep tracking back these thoughts and feelings that we label Marianne, we're going to get back to the first second of conception. So, of course, if you're Christian, God put the soul there and Marianne began. If you're a materialist, Mummy and Daddy's egg and sperm came together, and that's the beginning of Marianne. So the Buddhist view agrees with the egg and sperm one, no problem. Mummy and Daddy gave me a body, but they did not give me my mind, my consciousness. They did not give me my love, my compassion, my hate, my psychosis, my bliss. These are part of my own consciousness. So I track these back from now to the previous moment, the habit to do them, to the previous habit, to the previous habit, and you get right back to the first second of conception. And what was the cause of that the moment before? The egg is in Mummy's body, the sperm is in Daddy's body, a creator has nothing to do with it. Then your continuity of consciousness tracks itself back to a previous moment. And the Buddha's view is not more than a few weeks before that. It was in a previous body, and so on and so on and so forth. So this view of karma, this natural law that runs the universe, Buddha didn't make it up, is that every one of these minds, every millisecond, what we think and do and say, is this process of programming ourselves, this process of sowing seeds in our mind. So we come into this life, Marianne came into this life at the first second of conception, her consciousness programmed with the various tendencies that from her past habit that have now produced this new person called Marianne on the basis of the egg and sperm from mummy and daddy and from the conditioning of this life. But you come with you into this life with your tendencies. This is a fundamental point in Buddhist philosophy, psychology, metaphysics, everything. This is a fundamental point. So, therefore, the billions and billions and billions of beings in the universe, and the Buddha would assert many more than we can see, different realms of existence, each one of us experiencing each moment the fruit of our past programming. We're all our own creator, in a sense. Dalai Lama said it like that. It's a nice way of putting it. So then there's 4 ways the Buddha would say that our past actions, karma, tendencies will ripen in the present. One is the type of rebirth we get. So the Buddha would say, our getting a human body, your consciousness running like a magnet to your present mother's human womb while she was in bed with her daddy, where your consciousness joined the egg and sperm in your mummy's fallopian tube, that was no accident. You've got some intense history with those people. Your mind ran there. So getting a human body is like winning the lottery. Even though we make a mess of the human body, the human life, it's the best of a bad lot, as opposed to an animal or whatever. So within that life, let's say using Marianne's example, the 4 ways her past actions have ripened in the present. The first is she's got the human life. Now within that human body, she's got a mind. And we can see in the human realm, there's all kinds of minds. I mean, you've got Hitler and Mother Teresa, and anywhere in between of those. So that's pointing to the next way our karma ripens, which is our actual personality traits, our tendencies, our characteristic, our tendencies. So Marianne's thoughts and feelings and emotions, her being good at music, good at love, good at compassion, maybe she lies, whatever it is, positive, negative, these are your tendencies, and you came fully programmed with these from your past habits at the first second of conception in your mother's human womb. So the first way your karma ripens is the type of rebirth. The second way our past actions ripen is in terms of our tendencies, our personality traits. The third is, it's called experiences, similar to the cause. And we can see that we're very social beings. We all act in relation to others. So all the way we're seen and treated by others. This is the third way our past actions ripen in the present, and it's called experiences similar to the cause. So if you look into your life, all of us, from the first second of conception up to now, we can easily divide all the beings in our lives into those who've been nice to us and then those who've been mean to us. Pretty simple. Speaking simply, these are all experiences similar to the cause, good and bad. The fourth one is even called environmental karma. This feels a bit more abstract, but they have these it's all described in the text in great depth. So even the way the physical world impacts upon us. So the Buddhist view is this is like the creation principle. There's no creator up there running the show. There's no one punishing or rewarding. There's no concept like that, because in Buddhism there is no punisher and there's no rewarder. So using an example of one action, how it can have any of those 4 results. The first one, let's say the conscious intentional action of non-killing. The fundamentals of good ethics, not killing. So the karmic result of not killing in terms of a rebirth will be to get a decent human body. The second is you wake up in this life with no thought to kill anything, no ant, no dog, no rat, whatever. The third one is the result of non-killing. In your life itself, you won't get killed and you won't die young. Fourth, the environmental result of non-killing is that whatever, you're healthy, you're fit, you don't get sick much, and the food, the water, the air, the physical world nourishes you, not harms you. So this is the essence of the Buddhist view of karma, which is the view that the Buddha says is the view that runs the universe. It's his observation. No one runs it. It's not punishment, it's not reward, it's a natural law that merely occurs. So the fundamental level of practice in Buddhism, like I said before, given this law, and given very simply, I don't want future suffering, and I do want future happiness, then you start causing it by not killing, not stealing, not lying, and then gradually working on your mind and and then eventually helping others. That's the essence of it, Marianne. Any questions from that? Are you looking stunned? I can't tell.
No, but I'm still wondering.
Yeah.
if you look upon this period as, is this a chance for humanity to grow?
Okay, no, I hear you. Your good point.
Or
Yeah, no,
is
I
it a
get you.
punishment?
I get you. No, I get you. No. Okay, the point is we're going to look in life, whether you're a wise, conscious person or a suffering, ignorant person, suffering is still going to happen. So if you're wise, you'll use it. Now, my friends in prison, not every Mexican gangster, I promise you, not every Mexican gangster in prison in California wrote to us when I ran the Liberation Prison Project, but some of them did. So those guys, they had the karma to do negativity. They had the karma to be involved in a gang from past activity. They were killing and whatever. They got imprisoned, and then they also because of that event, they had the ability to access their goodness. So they started to read books and they started to change. So if we're wise, Marianne, that's the real point. We can use suffering as grist for our mill to develop ourselves and to help others. That's the wise thing to do. But we can see in the world most people don't do it. We just use it for more misery. Do you understand? It's wise, and often we can see it's the quickest way to grow. We all know when we get challenges, it's the quickest way to grow. So if we're wise, then they have a saying in Buddhism, we can use problems, we can transform problems into happiness. It's a marvelous way to live our lives, and that gives us great courage and great empathy and compassion for others. You understand?
Yes.
Yes, good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Thank you so much. Well, you people, I think it's nearly enough, and I've run out of voice. I'll see you again on Sunday. How about that? Maybe we'll talk a bit about meditation on Sunday. Should we do that? Where's Amanda? What do you think, Amanda? Can I leave early?
And Venerable, can we just see if there's any questions from our Latvian people?
Okay, otherwise we'll have them on Sunday.
Yes, exactly. So if there's any burning questions from the Latvian group, you can unmute yourself, speak in Latvian, and we will translate it. Or if you want to do it.
Latviešu grupa, ja kāds kādam ir jautājumi, tad jūs varat arī latviski uzdot, mēs patulkosim. I was just translating for
Good,
Latvian.
Inga, thank you, darling. Thank you, Inga.
Are
you the director there now, Inga? Are you the director, darling?
No, Ines is a director.
Oh, okay.
You've met her.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm still SPC.
Oh, good,
so, yeah.
wonderful. Of course, look at you. Yes, I remember now. You're still there. I love it. I'm so happy. Well done, girls.
Thanks.
So glad.
So yeah, I think perhaps Latvians are warming up.
I think Sundays are good. We'll have Latvian questions on Sunday.
Yeah, and then they could perhaps write them.
Exactly. Please, everybody. So thank you so much, darling people. I'm so grateful. I'll sing 2 little prayers to finish. So our little motivation at the beginning, I think it was like 2 bookends, you know. So we do another little one at the end. So the dedication prayer is just saying, here we've been for 2 hours nearly. As many thoughts that we've had is as many seeds we've planted. So we think we're going to nourish these seeds with our goodness, with our effort, with our work from this second, so these seeds will ripen in the future, no matter how long it takes, as our amazing Buddhahood, our perfection, our result, so we can be a benefit to others. And the second little prayer, may this marvelous aspiration to be a benefit to others, may it grow and grow in the minds of all. I'll just sing in Tibetan. Kewadinyu dudag Lama Sangye Drub Gyurne Drowa Chikyang Malupa Dei Sala Gopashok Jang Chub Sem Chogrim Poche Makib Panam Ke Gyutig Ke Panyampa Me Payang Gong Ne Gong Du Pavashok. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Venerable Athena. Good to see you. Good to see everybody. See you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Edgar. Was my pace not too bad today? Edgar? Okay. I tried to speak slowly. Did you notice?
No.
Oh, no, don't say that. Come on, you people. Goodbye. Thank you, Celeste, darling. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Bye. See you soon.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you,
Thank you.